Welcome to the Y Central Behaviour Management Training. This training is designed to give you some understanding of behaviour and some strategies for managing behaviour in our programs. We want to create fun, engaging programs where tamariki o rangatahi feel safe, build quality relationships, and develop pro-social skills. This in turn helps us to meet our vision of building strong kids, strong families, and strong communities. In this session, we will learn how behaviour is driven by needs, 5 components of effective behaviour management, the importance of quality relationships, responding effectively to behaviour, avoiding escalation of behaviour, using praise and reward, and consequences versus punishment. First off, we'll talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow was a psychologist who identified that people can have basic needs that must be met before they can get other needs met, and that behaviour is an attempt to meet our needs. These needs are set out in a hierarchy or pyramid. At the base of the pyramid is the physiological needs. That's your basic needs like food, warmth, water, shelter, and clothing. If we don't meet these needs, then we can't build on them to meet other needs. If a child comes to a program hungry, then we can't expect them to do anything until that need has been met. Following these base needs is the need for security both within a family and society. There are many communities where children aren't or don't feel safe, homes and family situations where children don't feel safe, and for some children, even school or our program is not a safe space and they don't feel secure. Children need boundaries and structure to feel safe and secure, and we often see behaviour in our programs where children are pushing boundaries. This behaviour is designed to test the boundaries so they know they're there and can feel safe and secure. Love and belonging needs are next. The need to receive and give love, to belong to a group, to have friendship. This need is very strong in children and can often override the security need. Hence we often see children who will cling to an abusive parent. Think about behaviours you see where children are trying to form friendships. Oftentimes, we need to help them develop these skills to relate to others. Many of the children in our program are neurodivergent, and this can be especially hard for them. If you have difficulty reading facial expressions or you see things in a particularly black and white manner, it can be hard to relate to others. Esteem needs are next, and these split into 2 parts. Esteem for oneself and the desire for reputation and respect from others. This second bit is very important for children and young people. How many times have you seen kids doing things to gain the respect of their peers? Maybe they are joking around because they want the reputation of the jokester in the class. These first 4 needs are labelled as deficiency needs. There is a deficit, something missing, that motivates the person. The last need is a growth need. It stems from a desire to grow rather than there being a deficit. This need is the need for self-actualization. So it's the need to grow, to be self-aware, to seek personal development. Unlike deficiency needs, where motivation decreases as needs are met, for growth needs, motivation increases as needs are met, i.e., the more someone grows and develops, the more they want to grow and develop. It is important to note that the original 5 needs of Maslow's theory have been increased to include cognitive and aesthetic needs under growth needs. For the sake of this training, however, we're going to look at these 5 original needs. So it's safe to say that our behaviour is driven by our attempts to meet our needs, and that behaviour is like an iceberg. What we see is only the tip of the iceberg. For every behaviour we see, there is a lot under the surface that is driving that behaviour. Unmet needs, a child's understanding, life experiences, and how they see the world all impact on behaviour. To fully understand behaviour, we must go beyond the observable to understand the thoughts and feelings related to needs. And it's important to say that there are no bad children, just undesirable behaviour. And the good behaviours that we do want in our program don't happen by accident. Good behaviour is planned for. It's important that we plan. If we put plans in place, set up environments, use our systems, skills and knowledge we have before a program starts, it goes a long way to ensuring that undesired behaviour doesn't happen in the first place. So effective behaviour management focuses on preventing undesired behaviour from occurring in the first place. It's easier to stop it from happening than it is to deal with it when it's happening. So applying the systems, the skills and knowledge you have before the program starts, and planning for effective behaviour management, and always evaluating our practice. So there are 5 components of effective behaviour management. And this is a child-centric model, so the child is always at the centre of what we do. Around the child is the environment we are in, the systems we use, for example, how do we serve afternoon tea, what is the process for roll call, how long do we expect kids to sit on the mat, etc. And then plan, do, and review. That is putting a plan in place, doing the activity, and reviewing the plan afterwards. It's important to look at what went well, what didn't go well, what could we change, how could we do things differently. As people who are working with children, it is important that we're always reviewing and reflecting on our own practice. The child is at the centre of what we do. They are the most important aspect of our programs and the reason they exist. If children didn't want to come to our programs, then we wouldn't have programs operating. So it's important that we convey an interest in each child in a safe, warm and caring environment. Show an interest, get to know our kids, goes a long way to making them feel safe, connected and respected. Understanding the needs of each of our participants is key. No 2 children are the same, and so the same strategy is not going to suit every child. We have neurodivergent kids in our programs who may find it overwhelming to be with other kids and need a quiet space to go away from others. We might have some kids with English as their second language and need a bit of extra help in understanding instructions. There's lots of different kids in our programs and lots of different ways that we can help them. So it's important that we understand the varying needs. Quality relations are really important for our programs. By building quality relations, we are creating a culture of care and respect versus a culture of coercion. We'll talk about this later in the training, but essentially we want kids to respect us and follow the rules because they want to and not because they are coerced into doing so. You may have heard about the concept of the emotional bank account or bucket filling. We all have an emotional bank account or a bucket. When people are kind and interact well with us, this fills our bucket or puts credit into our bank account. When we have conflicts or negative interactions with others, it puts our bank account in debit or our bucket is dipped into. We want to keep emotional bank accounts in credit, our buckets full. For every negative interaction, it takes 5 positive interactions to refill our buckets. The next component is the environment. We need to think about, is the program space welcoming, comfortable, and is the program engaging? It's very important in helping ensure positive behaviour. We need to think, are the basic needs being met? Safety, warmth, activity, food? Are there opportunities for food so that they aren't hungry? Is the temperature okay, not too cold or hot? Do they feel safe in the space? You also want children to have a sense of connection. Is the space owned by the children? Do they feel a sense of belonging? This can be hard to do if you're in a school hall that has to be packed away at the end of every day, but you can come up with creative ways to make it feel owned by the children. Make sure you get the kids involved, ask them their opinion and ideas. This is a great way to show them they are respected, but also helps them to feel confident that their voice is valued. We really want to make sure that there is a culture of respect and caring versus one of coercion or punishment. We talked about this briefly earlier in the training. If we have a culture of coercion, we are forcing kids to behave, and we often have to use loud voices, punishments to do so. If you have a culture of respect and caring, the kids will have respect for you and want to behave well, follow the rules because they want to impress you. Staff is our next component, and they are our greatest asset. It's really important that we have confident, well-trained, well-inducted staff because they make for great programs. So it's important that staff are well inducted into our programs. It's important that they are well-trained and have knowledge of our policies and procedures. As staff, you have a responsibility to keep up to date with training and to know policies and procedures. If you are unsure about anything, then don't hesitate to ask your manager or the other staff you work with. As staff, you need to manage established boundaries. No point having boundaries if staff aren't going to follow them. This makes children feel unsafe and insecure. Children must know that staff are united. There is no point in having a boundary if one staff tells the kids what the boundary is and then they ask another staff member who lets them change the boundary. Kids will always try and play you off against each other, so you will need to be on the same side. Staff are role models, so you need to role model expected behaviours. If we want kids to wear sun hats, as an example, wear a sun hat. If we want kids to say sorry when they make a mistake, role model saying sorry when you make a mistake. It's also important to prepare for your sessions and activities and review them following. If you're turning up for an after-school program, you don't want to turn up at the same time as the kids. You want to be ready to work when the kids arrive. It is also important that you get feedback from your supervisor and appraisals. Here at the Y, you should receive a yearly appraisal. If you're a casual staff member, you won't have a yearly appraisal, but you can request a check-in. It's important that we reflect on our practice and ask for feedback. It's also great to ask the kids for feedback as well. We want programs and activities where children are respected, have a voice, and see ownership of their space. This is impacted by the style of leadership we exhibit. Leadership is a continuum. On the left, we have authoritarian. This is the most directive, where there is no delegation, no sharing of decision-making, no flexibility with rules or procedures. I'm sure you can all think of a school teacher or maybe a work colleague who had the style. At the other end of the continuum is laissez-faire. This is a least directive, where there is a complete delegation of decision-making, complete flexibility with rules and procedures. Boundaries change all the time. There's no consistency. In the middle is authoritative, which is the leadership style we want to aim for when working with children and young people. Here, there is some delegation where appropriate, cooperative decision-making, and some flexibility with rules and procedures within agreed boundaries. It's important to note that there are situations when you do have to go up and down the continuum. If you're in a high-risk situation, such as taking a hoe ropes activity on camp or crossing a road with children, then you want to be authoritarian. The adult needs to be the decision maker. There are clear rules that need to be followed, otherwise there would be a bad outcome. We've talked about the importance of staff on our programs, how they need to be able to manage boundaries while having an authoritative leadership style, but what does this look like? As discussed, there need to be clear boundaries, in other words, non-negotiables in the program. These keep participants safe and make them feel secure. Inside of these boundaries, there is a degree of choice, negotiated rules, responsibilities, and consequences. This all helps to grow agency for our young people, which goes towards their self-esteem needs and meeting self-actualization. But think about a physical boundary. So, as an example, the children must stay within a hall at all times. The kitchen, the cloakroom, the outside areas are all out of bounds. So within the hall, the children can choose what activity they are doing, whereabouts they are and who they're hanging out with, but they're unable to go into the out of bounds area. So that is the non-negotiable. Boundaries can be physical, such as that, but they can also be behavioural. So, as an example, a boundary is that we keep our hands and feet to ourselves, or that we don't swear. As discussed previously, it is important that all staff are on the same page when it comes to boundaries. We want kids to be clear on what the boundaries are, and no matter who they ask, they should be told the same thing. Alongside maintaining boundaries, quality relationships are really important. We want to develop a culture of care and respect versus a culture of coercion. We've talked about this a lot, and quality relationships are a key part of creating that culture of care. It's really important that we are building quality relationships with the children and young people who are using our services, getting to know them, understand their likes and dislikes, filling their bucket all help to build a quality relationship that leads to increased influence and assists in maintaining desired behaviours. The last two components are systems and plan, do and review. Systems covers all the systems we have in our program. For example, how do we do our roll call? What is the program timetable? When do we go outside? How do we get toys out, etc.? These systems must be set up in a way that helps children maintain desired behaviour. For example, If kids are hungry when they finish school, there is no point in having afternoon tea an hour after the program starts. They're not going to want to engage or do activities when all they want to do is eat. Equally, if they've been sitting in class all day, they probably want to run around. So it will be difficult to get them to sit down and do a full roll call and briefing. How do we manage that? Do we sign them in as they arrive and then go straight out to play a game, or have afternoon tea straight away, or something else? It is important to think about systems and how they will work for the children. It is important to note that systems can change. Nothing is set in concrete. What might work this week might not work next week. The next component is plan, do, and review, and it's important that you have a plan for how you set up your program, an activity plan. I always say that the more you plan, the more flexible you can be. Once you've done and experienced the plan, it is important to reflect and discuss. How did it go? Was there things we need to change? Did we have the right resources? Do we need to change group sizes? These reflections and discussion then inform our plan so that it is constantly evolving. Sometimes there might be no changes needed for a long time and you keep doing the same thing ongoing. Other times it can change every week based on the makeup of your group. It's also important to engage the children and young people in the reflection process. This gives them a voice and ownership of the program, which all helps to go towards growing their agency and building their esteem. Engagement in the program is really important. We want to give the kids ownership and involvement because these two things added together lead to commitment. If we involve them in the decisions that affect them, we have less resistance. This goes back to having a culture of respect and caring versus a culture of coercion. Giving them an ownership, involving them in our programs, we are creating that culture of respect and showing that we value their opinion. And children will do things because they want to, not because they have to or are coerced into doing it. Having them involved also helps them to grow agency. Agency is the ability of people to express their own individual power through thoughts or actions. It is the power that allows people to think for themselves and be the ones in charge of shaping their experiences. That goes towards building self-esteem and heading up towards realizing self-actualization. How do we grow agency with kids? We give them choice from options presented which are all acceptable to us. So, for example, we might get them to choose what game they want to play today and give them 3 options. They can either choose from octopus, ultimate tag, or line ticking. Or we might give them the choice of having Marmite or jam sandwiches for afternoon tea. All acceptable options to us, but they have the choice. It's also important that they learn about responsibility for consequences of choices. So, for example, there might only be 30 minutes left in a program and they really want to do an activity. So we can say to them, hey, there's only 30 minutes left. We can continue doing this activity for the next 30 minutes, but you won't get to do the activity you want to do. Or we can stop now and go on and do the activity that you want to go for the next 30 minutes. They can make the choice and then they have the consequence. And the consequence is they either don't get to do the activity that they want to, or they do get to do it. And that all helps to grow agency for them. We want to also build a child's self-esteem. And that happens when we give them challenges. So we have stretch challenges. So a challenge that stretches them, but gives them a 90% chance of success. There's no point in giving them a challenge that's impossible for their developmental age because they will become frustrated and there'll be little to no chance of them succeeding and it won't help to build their self-esteem is set. In fact, it could have the opposite. But if we give them a challenge that stretches them but has a 9% chance of success, they're likely to build their self-esteem. We can have all these great things in place in our program and have really great programs running, great environments, great staff, have lots of planning and reflection. But there will always be undesirable behaviours happening and we need to respond to them. The first thing we need to do is know when to intervene. Sometimes There are undesirable behaviours, but kids are able to rectify them themselves, which is a really good skill to develop. So we need to think about when do we as adults intervene, and that's when a behaviour demonstrates an unmet need, it's causing serious or consistent disruption to the programming, or it's causing harm to either the child themselves, to others around them, to equipment, or to the surrounding environment. So if we do need to intervene, how do we respond? And first of all, we do think, do I need to intervene? Will it escalate or sort itself out? And then we need to observe and clarify. What can you see? What need is driving behaviour? And there's nothing worse than an adult going in and making an assumption around what is happening. That helps to disrespect the child, and it's a negative interaction that, dips out of their bucket. When we do respond, we want to respond in a caring and respectful manner. Avoid confrontation, keep it short, and use the least invasive approach. And when we finish, we want to record, report, and evaluate. So once we have dealt with the incident and we've responded in a respectful and caring manner, then we're going to report on an incident report around what's happened. So incident reports are found on the internet, and you can ask your manager where to find them. They need to be completed, and then they need to be signed and read by the parent or caregiver. It's also important that we evaluate incidents once they've happened. Is there something in the environment that we can change? Is there a system? Is there our own practice that needs to be changed? Really important that we're evaluating following incidents as well. As I said, when we're responding to behaviour, it's important to observe and clarify what's happening. And it's really important to see another person's side of or point of view. And that's where the ladder of inference comes into play. So the ladder of inference is how we build our beliefs in the world. So we see observable data. So something happens. We watch it like sort of a video recorder might capture it. We then select data from what we observe, and we add meanings to it. And that meaning comes from our personal experiences, our culture, previous interactions we've had, and so on. And we make assumptions based on the meanings we add. We then draw conclusions, and we adopt beliefs about the world based on that. There is a reflexive loop, so those beliefs then feed back in and affect the next data that we select next time. And all these beliefs is what we take action on. So as an example, I might be standing in front of a group of people and someone sitting in front of me laughs. So I interpret that as meaning they are making fun of me. I conclude they don't respect me. And so I solidify that into a belief that they are my enemy. So I take action on that belief and I start making fun of them again. Or I get upset that they don't like me, or I have another sort of reaction. So I start treating them as my enemy. Then every time I see them, I'm primed to notice signs that they are my enemy. And because I act the way that I do, I actually end up an enemy with them. But if I knew they were laughing because someone beside them had said something funny, we wouldn't have ended up as enemies. So it's really important that we ask questions to send kids up and down the ladder of inference and find out what their perspective is and how they're seeing things. So for example, if I had found out that the other person was laughing at a joke instead of laughing at me, it would have ended up in a whole different situation. But we always have conflicts in our programs, and we need to know how to handle conflict. Many times, children will have conflict and they're able to sort it out themselves. Again, that's a really important skill to have, so you want to allow them to have the agency to be able to do that. Sometimes they can't handle the conflict themselves, and so we need to step in and guide them through that process. And the goal is that both parties feel seen, heard, understood, and accepted. There's a real risk sometimes. There's that kid that's labelled as the naughty kid on the program, and so they end up always getting blamed for situations. It goes back to the ladder of inference. A situation has happened before, and so then ongoing in the future, you tend to blame that child. And there's nothing worse. It disrespects them, it dips out of their bucket, it reduces their emotional bank account, and really creates negative interactions. So we want to make sure that we are listening to both sides of the story. We're giving equal opportunity for both sides to be heard and understood. We want to react with empathy. We want to react with safety, creating a safe space. And many times we have to diffuse the nuclear bomb, so to speak. So that's emotion before issue. We can't deal or talk about the issue until the emotion is dealt with. We need to be actively listening for what is said and also what is not said, because there's body language that we can be aware of too. And asking those questions that take the children up and down the ladder of influence. You want to create a shared understanding of each other's point of view. So if you go back again to that situation of someone laughing at me, if someone had stepped in and spoken to me and spoken to the other person, and then they'd shared their point of view and I'd understood that they weren't laughing at me, the situation could have been quite different and we could have handled that conflict. I could have apologised for reacting the way I did, and they could have apologised for laughing at a joke when they should have been listening to me. Sometimes there has to be calming down before we can even discuss an issue, and that's because of an amygdala hijack. So the amygdala is a small part of the brain in our primitive emotional limbic system that responds to threat. So it's kind of like the Neanderthal response back when we were, hunter-gatherers and there was the threat of predators. So it's what we call our fight, flight, or freeze response. So when there is a threat, we shut down and we either fight, we run away, flight response, or we shut down completely and we freeze. So what happens is the prefrontal cortex, or the executive function, is deactivated and we lose rationality and control. So we really can't think. There's lots of times when we get annoyed, we have minor annoyances, but we can still think. We're still logical, we still keep our control. In amygdala hijack, that goes out the window. You cannot talk to someone who is having a hijack. They are not rational. So they need time to calm down to get back to rationality before you can have that conversation. And there's a number of ways to do that. Things like counting to 10, 3 deep breaths, stop, walk away, ask for help. And some people take longer than others. For some, it may be a matter of a few minutes. Some might be a few hours. Others might even take the whole next day. But it's important that we give them time to calm down before we talk about it. And it's important to note that our kids that have been in traumatic environments go into a hijack really easily, and they stay in there for a lot longer, and it takes a lot longer to bring them down because they have been in that amygdala response for a long time, and so their body goes into it really quickly. And so they may need a day or so to calm down before we even try to discuss the issue with them. The other thing we need to look out for as adults is the tit-for-tat cycle, and we need to avoid it. So what happens is a child or a young person reacts with pain-based behaviour, and that reaction, for whatever reason, triggers an emotion in us, and that emotion causes us to react, which then triggers an emotion in the young person, which causes them to react, which then triggers an emotion with us and causes us to react. And so we keep escalating and everything gets heightened. We want to avoid that. It's okay to back down, to stop, to walk away and to cool down. We need to remember that we are the adults. We are a lot more developed than a child or a young person is. So we need to remember that we are the adults and to take control of the situation. So it's perfectly fine to say to a colleague, hey, I can't handle this at the moment. Can you just deal with this situation? And that's actually a really good way of role modelling de-escalation to children. If they see that there are times that we need to walk away to cool down, that role models that behaviour for them. Another way of managing behaviour is the use of praise and reward. Studies show us that positive behaviour increases when recognised via praise and reward. So the child learns to associate feeling good from the praise with the desired action. And then in seeking the wee buzz again, they do more of the behaviour. So learning by association was one of the most basic ways of learning. And these theories were studied and experimented with rats and pigeons and dogs, but they equally apply to us as humans. And in saying that, we want to be clear and descriptive about what we are wanting to see more of. We're giving them feedback and an opportunity to learn. So it's not just a manipulation, we are respecting the agency of the child. So when we praise, we want to praise publicly and spread it all around. Kids love that, and it goes back to building their self-esteem, that building their reputation and having the respect of the others around them, and it makes them feel good. Using challenges and competitions is also a great way to encourage the desired behaviours in our programs. But it's important that we change them regularly. Things get old, kids get bored of them, so we need to change them around. And some challenges and competitions that work for some groups of kids might not work for others. And you can have really quick, easy challenges. As an example, at the end of the day, if you're cleaning up, get the kids, how many pieces of rubbish can you collect? Or who's the fastest to pick up 5 pieces, and then you can have more formalized competitions as well. In terms of challenges and praise and reward, there are children who it might be a little bit harder to give them praise, who typically present with challenging behaviour, but you can praise them for not displaying the undesired behaviours. So in essence, catch them doing something right. You know, kids love attention, and it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive attention. They like that attention. So if they are misbehaving and they get the attention, they're going to keep doing that behaviour. But if you give them positive behaviour for something else, they will get that same buzz and they will start to do that positive behaviour. So if a child usually talks through debrief as an example, notice a time when they're quiet and paying attention and say, Tommy, thank you for listening to me right now. I really appreciate it. And that will help to get that desired behaviour happening. When we're giving praise or feedback, there's 2 types. There's descriptive. So that's specific positive feedback. So isn't it cool the way those 2 colours have combined to create that beautiful purple? And then there is evaluative, where there is a blanket judgment. For example, great work. Kids can learn more from descriptive feedback. With evaluative feedback, it can tend to get people pleasing behaviour without the learning. So both are great, and we want to give praise, whatever it is, but if we can give descriptive feedback, that's better because it helps with learning. When we are responding to behaviour, we need to have the conversations, but we also need to give consequences. So now we're going to talk about the difference between punishment and consequence. To have an effective punishment, it requires the administration of physical, social, or emotional pain. It's often about retribution and is often unrelated to the act the child has done. You know, it could lead to the ignoring or removal of needs. For example, parents are really good at this. They might, ground a child, or they can't watch TV for a month, but completely unrelated to what the behaviour is. Whereas consequences hold an individual accountable for their reactions. Consequences are related to the nature of the acts committed. So as an example, if little Johnny keeps leaving the Lego pieces out, and which means that people stand on them and break them, the consequence would be that maybe tomorrow they can't play with the Lego. If someone is not following the rules and playing a game, a consequence would be that they have to step out and take some time out from the game. So the consequence is directly related to the act committed, so they are learning about it. It should also be related to the age and ability of the child and the seriousness of the act. Consequences should be completed as soon as possible after the act has taken place, because that ensures that paired learning can occur. However, There are going to be situations when that's not the case. We've already talked about the amygdala hijack, and when a hijack is happening, there is no control or rational thought. So giving a consequence to a child at that time, it's not going to happen. They're not going to be able to talk about the issue, let alone understand a consequence. So we need to give them time to calm down. That could be a few minutes, it could be an hour, it could unfortunately be the next day. It's important that we give the consequence following the action, but we need to give them that time to calm down. And sometimes other children might get a little bit upset about this because they see it as that child getting away with something. But we just need to explain to them, yes, there is a consequence, but they are going to get the consequence once they're able to calm down. And then when they are calmed down, we need to have the conversation and give them the consequence so that they understand that the consequence is related to the behaviour and it's not just a random thing that's happening to them. These are the disciplinary steps when we are dealing with behaviour. And the first is a warning or a reminder. Hey Johnny, remember we keep our hands and feet to ourselves. Hey Johnny, remember we pack away the Lego once we've finished playing with it. The behaviour might still continue, so that's when you get a second warning with an outline of the consequence if the behaviour continues. Hey Johnny, we pack away Lego when we've finished playing. If you don't pack it away, then you won't be able to play with the Lego tomorrow. Then, if it still continues, there's time out to reflect on the behaviour, there's a conversation and consequences. And it's important that there is a conversation and that the children really understand the link between their behaviour and the consequence that's happening. Sometimes behaviours will still continue, or it's immediately serious enough that we do an incident reform and we talk with the parent and caregiver. We've talked about incident forms before, and so those are found on the intranet, and we need to make sure that they're filled out, that they're read and signed by the parent and caregiver, and that they're uploaded to the intranet as soon as practically possible. Sometimes there might be multiple incident forms and there's no change. And so in that case, there would be a meeting with the parents and the site manager. So that would be handled by the manager, and there might be a behaviour support plan put in place or other accommodations put in place to help the child. We might need to make some changes. And still no change. As an absolute last resort, we have exclusion, but that is an absolute final resort. That's not something that we take lightly and not something that we do very often. And there must be incident reports to support that exclusion. So many times I have people tell me, oh, this behaviour has been ongoing, we see it a lot, but there's no paperwork to support that. There's no paper trail. And so we can't move to the next steps if we don't have that paper trail, which is why it's really important that we are keeping open dialogue with parents and that we're keeping a paper trail. As well as having that open dialogue helps to build relationships as well. On the next page, we have the Behaviour Management Guide. So this sits alongside our Behaviour Management Policy, and it's just a step-by-step response guide. It's a visual guide to help you through behaviour management processes. And this is available on sites as well as on the intranet. And for after school and holiday programs, you should have it on your notice boards as well. So you think about, did anyone get hurt? Is it repeated behaviour? Is it serious? So for minor incidents, those are things like, it might be running inside because you're breaking program rules, swearing. You do your reminder and encourage the responsible behaviour. If it's still ongoing, there's quiet time, time out, and then they're back on track. Easy as that. There might be repeated minor incidents. So it's minor incidents, but they're repeated a lot of the time. Or there's a one-off major incident. So a major incident would be things like ongoing breaking of program guidelines, biting, fighting, verbal assault. So you have quiet time. If more than one party is involved, you have your conflict resolution and then incident reporting. The parent and caregiver is notified on arrival, and the manager would talk through with them the discuss options to manage the behaviour. The parent would sign the incident report and it's submitted onto the intranet. Sometimes there are parents that don't pick their children up, so the manager would then contact that parent by phone or email through the incident report for them to see. In very rare situations at that point, would alternative care arrangements be found, i.e. exclusion. You might have a parent meeting at this time. You might write up a behaviour support plan to support that young person with their behaviour so they can work well on the program and then they're back on track. Then there might be incidences where there's a repeat of those major incidences, or there's a one-off extreme incident. And an extreme incident would be things like an attack with a weapon, physical abuse to staff, extreme verbal abuse. Now those things do not happen very often, but this is a response if you do. Straight away, quiet time and incident report, parent caregiver contacted, manager notified. Sometimes there could be program respite, and that's effective immediately where they have time off from the program. It might be 1 or 2 days. A co-developed behaviour plan, so a behaviour support plan, and in some situations outside support. And then they might be back on track or alternate care arrangements. And again, incident reports must be completed, signed and logged onto the intranet as soon as practicably possible. And if you have any concerns or questions, talk to your supervisor, coordinator or manager immediately. So this response guide is found on the intranet, which is ycentral.myhubintranet.com. Now there are some techniques that we don't use at all at the Y. The first is smacking or physical restraint. Now the caveat around that is for youth services, in our behaviour management policies, it says if there are youth services staff that are specifically trained in physical restraint, then they can use physical restraint in a situation where a child might be harming themselves or others. That is the only time where physical restraint could be used, and that's only by those specifically trained staff. Otherwise, we don't use smacking or any kind of physical restraint or physical violence towards a child. We don't use shaming or use of demeaning statements, name-calling, teasing, and also take care with humour because it's really easily misunderstood. If we look back at that ladder of inference, we all see things differently. So what I take as a joke, you might take as offensive and vice versa. So we don't want to have something misunderstood and to upset or demean someone unintentionally. We don't yell or swear. We don't use isolation. And we don't use removal of food, warmth or safety, whether physical or emotional. All of these things are no-nos, and they are things that we don't do on our program. So that is the end of this behaviour management training. Following this, you will complete a short quiz. So the short quiz is found on the new staff information page. There is a link on the page below this training. So if you click through to that link, you can then complete that short quiz. There's a few questions there just to show your understanding of this training. If you do have any questions following this training, talk to your manager in the first instance. Otherwise, you can contact me, Amy Morland. My role is Quality, Compliance and Safeguarding Advisor here at Y Central, and my email is amy.morland@ycentral.nz. But thank you for completing this training on behaviour management. We hope it was helpful, and we look forward to having you on our programs with our young people.